Bitteschön.
Dann dazu noch eine Nachfrage. Was ist denn mit Joho Park? Ist ein sehr erfahrener Bundesligaspieler, kann ja eigentlich auch links hinten spielen.
Der Jogo Part.
Ja.
Help me.
Hello and welcome to episode 290 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and this week we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's upcoming Bundesliga match against Bayer Leverkusen, which will kick off on Saturday afternoon. And for our guest, it's going to be 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And to discuss the upcoming match joins me Eric from the Neverkusen Podcast and also from LA. Hello, Eric. How are you doing?
Stefan, hello. Very nice to be here. Thank you again for having me. And 290 podcasts. That's insane, dude. You are very close to 300, and hats off to you guys for this Yellowwallpod being the thing it has been. Amazing. That's pretty incredible.
Well, that is very kind of you. I don't know which episode is the Neverkusen podcast at, but you have also been around forever, so it can't be that much behind.
We are very far behind because we are much lazier than you guys.
Anywho, this episode is sponsored by @BVB09_Uruguay. Thanks for pitching in and helping us out on our Patreon. That is very much appreciated, especially this month. Because Eric, I don't know if you know this, but I right now am in Philadelphia and I'm applying for my green card, and the immigration services demand of me doing a medical where they draw blood and all that, and I had to pee in a cup. And even though I'm now health insured here, problem is it's still not covered, so that just alone cost $375. So it's very expensive to go through all these processes. So I'm very grateful for everyone who's chipping in. And of course, if you want to sponsor an episode like the very kind person from Uruguay, which is, by the way, quite amazing to have people from all over the world, then you can go on patreon.com/theyellowwall for more information, or to subscribe to all our written content, which shall pick up in this very heated week with Bayer Leverkusen and Barcelona coming to the Westfalenstadion. And before we dive in, also shout out to Orbis Aftermath for leading the Yellowwallpod.com Bundesliga Fantasy League. My FC Automatism crabbed back from 84th to 73rd place, so I'm not quite out of the race yet. And lastly, our longtime listener @AwesomeBill3 on Twitter has asked me to give him a little shout out because he is traveling to the Leverkusen game on Saturday all by himself from the United States, and he is asking whether there's anyone out there who would like to grab a beer with him before the game. Again, @AwesomeBill3 is the Twitter handle. I'll also link it in the show notes. So, Eric, I don't know about you, but I personally, as a Dortmund fan, I'm quite nervous about Saturday because I'm not too confident in the black and yellows right now. Dortmund are probably not going to have the services of center back Manuel Akanji and left back Nico Schulz, who both picked up injuries during the international break, both ankle injuries. Are there any worries in personnel for Leverkusen?
In terms of personnel, really not too many. In terms of what's available to us, anyway. I'm a little bit concerned. Obviously, with the international breaks having occurred, it's going to make some players a Charles Aranguiz, which I think would be a key player against Dortmund. For example, it's going to be a little bit touch and go, I guess, in terms of getting there on time. And it's someone that I think at least in the central midfield, defensive midfield, is absolutely unnecessary against Dortmund. But as far as injuries are concerned, I think we're pretty much in very good shape. Everybody's available to Peter Bosz for the most part. I think even Johan or Poyan Palo is back in somewhat form, so could potentially be on the cards. But I think it's less a concern about injuries and more concern about who the starting lineup is going to be.
Yeah. So, Leverkusen hired one of Dortmund's exes with Peter Bosz, and Abel Mescheros, who you obviously also know, wrote a piece for Setzbomb in which he highlighted that since Bosz took over, Leverkusen have actually outperformed Dortmund points-wise. Dortmund scored in that, I think, 20-game time frame 40 points to Leverkusen's 41. So that already kind of shows the parity between the two sides. So since Bosz took over, I think it was in the last winter break, right?
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the Rückrunde, can you maybe expand a little bit on how overall that went and how happy you are with the Dutchman?
Obviously, we're very thrilled with him and his bald pate. It's nice to see that on the sidelines every weekend. And since he took over in January last year, or this past year, it's obviously been a very different Leverkusen, and one that's very much Peter Bosz Leverkusen, where this is demanding ball control and possession of the ball at all times. Obviously, there's kind of a high press. It's not different, let's say, from what Roger Schmidt brought to Leverkusen. But this isn't counterattacking football the way Roger Schmidt brought it. This is intended to be control the ball, control the game, and have eventually have your victory because of that control. And I think for the most part, it's worked really well in a lot of cases. Definitely offensively, I don't know that Leverkusen isn't necessarily set up defensively to play Peter Bosz ball, and I think Dortmund obviously knows that experience very, very well. So far, it hasn't bitten us in the ass the way it did you guys previously, maybe in some part because Peter Bosz spent half his season thinking about what he did wrong at Dortmund before he came to Leverkusen. And I think it's important for people to remember that, when Peter Bosz was up for both positions, both Leverkusen and Dortmund were after him initially, and Dortmund obviously and generally tends to win those battles. But we kind of got him as a second run, and maybe that's for the best because he's been given a little time to think about things. And it's it's still Peter Bosz ball. You saw it against Hoffenheim, a team we probably should have beaten last week. That we're still very much. Yeah, we're still very much vulnerable when it comes to high balls over the top, just because of that high line that Peter Bosz likes to play. But it's exciting. It's exciting football right now, and it's basically just a question of can we get the right players in at the right positions, and with the new players that we have at Leverkusen, can Peter Bosz find the right lineup, the right system for those new players?
Yeah, how have Leverkusen coped without Julian Brandt? Obviously, Dortmund signed him for the sweet price of only 25 million euros in the summer.
God.
So, obviously, he only has one start so far for Dortmund against Union Berlin, and that was certainly not his best game. So, he still has to find his groove with the black and yellows. However, I think he was an integral part for Leverkusen, and also because Bosz stuck him more centrally. So, obviously there's still Kai Havertz hanging around and other players. So, how has Leverkusen replaced him?
Yeah, I'm not sure that they have necessarily. And I think what you say, Bosz played him centrally, so kind of gave the blueprint to Dortmund on how to play Julian Brandt. And Julian Brandt, I think, even though he didn't start necessarily in your last game, was absolutely very good, in my opinion. I will go on to say that he does look in the BVB uniform like a highlighter marker that the cat has been left off from.
He does. It's very nice because he's very easy to spot that way, because I feel there are too many Dortmund players that look too similar, and I have sometimes problems to identify them because my TV here is not 4K HD yet. So so that's very convenient.
It is. And I think actually that last Hoffenheim match, you saw what it meant not to have a Julian Brandt. We were the better team and just lacked that kind of final spark. And when a team like Hoffenheim, who plays very intelligently, manages to mark out a Kai Havertz, so basically taking the other important element from the team out of the game. Last year, you could count on Julian Brandt, even though sometimes he dribbled into the defense maddeningly to some extent. But there was always that creative element next to Kai Havertz, which is now somewhat missing. I don't know that we've necessarily tried to replace Julian Brandt with Karim Demirbay. He's a different player to some extent. It's probably the case that Nadia Mamiri, who Leverkusen signed as well, TSG, over the summer, who probably comes closer. But I did realize or recognize in that last game that, it kind of hurts not having Julian Brandt. And obviously those two are very good friends. You just need to look at social media and get really annoyed real quick to see how close of friends they are. But they understand each other on the pitch very much. And it'll take a little bit of time, I think, for Leverkusen to overcome that.
Yeah, I assume so, but I think the acquisitions of Kerim Demirbay and Mustafa Amiri are absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked Demirbay at Dortmund, to be honest. For me, that would have been a very good replacement for Julian Weigl, who had a very good start and a fantastic preseason, but also in the last two games sort of fell into the old scheme and the old passing phlegma, where you are not very happy with Julian Weigl because it just lacks that bit of verticality. And I think Kerem Demirbay would have added that, especially because he also used to play for Dortmund in
right.
I don't know if it was the under 23 or the other youth teams, but he was at Dortmund in the past, and then I think over Hamburg and Hoffenheim, not entirely sure. But he developed quite nicely into a very good Bundesliga player, and so I could have imagined him pretty well back at Dortmund. So what is very interesting about these two teams clashing, of course, is let's call it the very patient one against the impatient one, because Lucien Favre right now is not really applying that high press which Peter Bosz is doing. Those are definitely the two teams, I think, according to who scored, with the highest possession in the Bundesliga right now. Yeah, Dortmund have average possession of 69.4 and Leverkusen are at 65.4. So that already tells you that both are very capable at having the ball. And looking at how poorly Dortmund currently manage against teams that press them, and Cologne and Union Berlin both did it to Dortmund's detriment, that should be very interesting. And I do really wonder if the result will be similar to the 3-2 win of Dortmund in February, not the final scoreline, but rather how the game turns out. Because I think after 70 minutes, Leverkusen had around 70%, which was, just daunting for Dortmund. And I think the expected goal plot was like 0.1 to 0.26 after 29 minutes. So I think Leverkusen had like 5 chances while Dortmund had almost 0. And then I think they grabbed the lead with a lucky corner kick or so. I think Zagadou scored or so. To go back to my first point, for Dortmund, this is already a bit of a make or break game, because they had 3, I would say, relegation threatened teams, maybe not Cologne, but also promoted team. And this is where Dortmund have traditionally struggled in the last Rückrunde. And now, obviously, I'm very keen to see if Lucien Favre at least can still beat sides from the upper tier, because that's where Dortmund were quite strong. And so, of course, have a very sweet counterattack going as well. But there are a lot of worries for Dortmund going into this game. So I'm a bit anxious just because of how well Leverkusen really press, and I think Peter Bosz already deserved to win the first game in Dortmund, but I think it was a bit unfortunate, but also classic Peter Bosz, I guess. So we'll see how this pans out. But I assume if we flip this script around, you going to Dortmund mustn't be too comfortable either. So, what are your worries going into match day for you?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. The same concerns that Dortmund fans have are the ones that Bayer Leverkusen fans have. It's early in the season. We meet each other on, the third day of the season, so to speak, or the third match day. Already things are starting to kind of show themselves. RB Leipzig, on a Neverkusen the last Neverkusen podcast, I picked them to win the league this year. And it really wouldn't surprise me at all if they did. So we're, in my opinion, fighting for those top four spots, basically. And yeah, this is going to be a big game. This is going to decide to some extent, or not decide necessarily, but at least be an indication of what the rest of the season is going to look like. And yeah, Leverkusen, I think, goes to Dortmund. Again, when you're playing Peter Bosz possession football, it's kind of a nice feeling to be able to go in an away stadium and you can still play your game, so to speak. You're not, Bayer Leverkusen is a good enough team that they're not necessarily thinking we have to just, park the bus and then counterattack. We can play our regular game. But what that will mean or entail in Dortmund is going to be difficult. And certainly I think BVB, after that, as they say in German, Klatsche against Berlin, is going to be coming out all guns firing. And, you guys have Jadon Sancho, you guys have Marco Reus, two guys who I'm curious to see what Peter Bosz trots out there. If it's a back line of three people, I'm somewhat concerned about that because Jadon Sancho can pick that apart, in my opinion. But at the same time, if we play a back line of four, then maybe we're not taking the game to Dortmund that we potentially could. So we'll see. I think the big battle this weekend is going to be in the midfield, and it's going to be, let's see if Aranguiz is there. Maybe Nadia Mamiri in a forward role will be an important component. I'm hopeful. But yeah, we've got to get past Axel Witsel. I think is absolutely, he's absolutely one of the best players in the Bundesliga, and so if we can get around that guy, then I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, looking at what Lucien Favre is likely to do, I think there will be a double pivot with either Delaney or Weigl. So. Yeah, going up against Aranguiz and who else will be there? Do you expect Bosz to play a double pivot? I actually don't quite see it.
Yeah, I would hope he'd be a little bit more. I would hope not. I think this game is actually a good opportunity for Peter Bosz to try something a little new, so to speak, or just give, in my opinion, Amiri a role here that, to tell him you're going up against a good team and let's see what you can do centrally. And yeah, we'll see. Demirbay is always obviously a good option and will likely actually start this match. But he does, as we said on our last podcast, Patrick made a good point. He does kind of slow up the game, and that's an important component. But I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like in Dortmund, you've got to go for it all. And Demirbay might not be the person to to play it in this match. And, if we want to really win this match, then let's go a little bit more offensive and let's go with the Miri.
So what kind of system would that be?
Ideally, for me, it's like a 4-2-2-2-2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a bit like Leipzig last season.
Yeah, exactly. With the wingers, obviously, in my opinion, Karim Bellarabi and Leon Bailey have done a wonderful job, and they should stay there. With them cutting in decisively and incisively.
Yeah, so you have Kevin Volland up top, I guess, who is your most productive scorer so far. I think he has 2 assists and how many goals? Also 1 or 2? I think just 1, right? I think Leverkusen have 5 players who each scored 1 goal. I don't think there's anyone else so far. So yeah, I mean, Kevin Volland is obviously always a threat because he is a bit more eclectic than Paco Alcácer, I would say, because of his physique and his pace, 2 things that Alcácer doesn't have necessarily, and
also his giant ass, which he's very good. He's very good at keeping people off the ball because of how big his ass is. But Kevin Volland is someone in the last year. I'll use this opportunity because I'm not going to admit it on the Neverkusen podcast, but I'll use this opportunity to say I was completely wrong about Kevin Volland. He's fantastic. There's a big reason why he's one of the captains when Bender isn't able to play. There's a big reason why he's one of the captains of this team, and that dude, as they say in Germany, he rips his ass off for the team. That guy runs harder than anybody else I've ever seen, except for maybe Lars Bender.
Yeah, that is maybe the key, actually. We can talk about systems all we want all day, but
exactly
for Dortmund, the biggest problem so far this season actually has been their attitude. They've just been not really up to speed, quite literally, because they were a bit lazy here and there, not really trying to push the envelope. Let's see if I can find another phrase, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Phrasenschwein.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I think Leverkusen, I haven't looked it up, but from the podcast I'm listening to, I think it was mentioned several times that Leverkusen are currently the team that runs the most. Just in terms of distance, that always does not translate into intensive runs and whatnot, because sometimes you lose the ball often, so you have to run more. If you just pass it around and don't do much with it, like Dortmund, you obviously don't have to run as much. So there's that. But yeah, I'm very keen to see how that pans out. Whether I think Leverkusen will be on the throttle the entire opening half hour again, and if Dortmund can weather the storm, or B, counter that right away with their own high level of intensity and see who wins that possession battle, because there can only be one team with the majority of the ball. And usually when there are 2 possession heavy sides, it's the one that's better at winning it back. And right now I would assume that's Leverkusen. So I think that Dortmund will be quite often in their own half, and I think Lucien Favre will actually be quite comfortable with it, because there's one weapon that Dortmund didn't really get to show so far, and as I previously mentioned, that's the counterattack. I think that's a good time to mention that Thorgan Hazard will be back from a rib injury, so he should definitely play, and he's a very pacey player next to Julian Brandt and Marco Reus. And of course, Jadon Sancho. I don't know if that's going to be the lineup, but that would be a lot of pace. Or maybe Hazard comes on later as a super sub. But either way, Dortmund will be frighteningly quick. There's one tiny question mark behind Marco Reus' form, because so far this season he hasn't really fired quite on all cylinders yet. But I think in this game, the firm, the amount of space he gets, this should be a team that should suit his own playing style because he will receive a little bit more space. So we'll see. How do you see Leverkusen's backline? Because I think you're playing with. Do you play with both benders now?
Yeah, it depends, really. But it's a good point you make about Marco Reus, especially if you kind of look back at this international week that obviously we all hate. Marco Reus had one of the worst matches of any German player against Holland. Or the Netherlands, and so did Jonathan Tah. And those two players will be, I think, front and center this weekend. And, it is the case that the backline of Bayer Leverkusen is very susceptible to especially balls over the top. Hoffenheim did an absolutely fantastic job of exposing Bayer Leverkusen. And, all it takes, Bayer Leverkusen is... any Peter Bosz team is always going to be a team that tries to outscore its opponents rather than try to hold its opponents to 0 goals. So, it'll be interesting to see. And it's, as you say, Bayer Leverkusen has run and does run in every game more than almost any other Bundesliga team. That's always something that can potentially be pointed to in terms of Peter Bosz as that's why, teams break down in the second half of the season or what have you. It'll be interesting. I am very curious to see how. I'm sure that, Peter Bosz has had 2 weeks now to consider the attacking line of Borussia Dortmund, which is one of the best in the Bundesliga. By the same token, I will say the quadrant of 4, so to speak, for Bayer Leverkusen are also almost as good. So it'll be interesting to see how Dortmund deals with that. I'll be interested to see how Lucas Piszczek, for example, deals with, I guess, who will
Bailey.
it be? Bailey, coming down his side. These are two teams who are very similar, I guess. Now, having spoken to you throughout this podcast, I'm recognizing these are two teams who are very similar to one another. And I guess it just depends, on the team who decides to put their foot on the gas, so to speak, and doesn't get hurt in the back.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the scoreline will not be 0-0 as it was for Leverkusen against Hoffenheim. Just because I don't see if Leverkusen repeat the feat of getting 19 corners, I don't think they will remain scoreless. I think Demir Bay already alluded to that. I think he said set pieces can decide games, and that's of course before you meet Dortmund, you will train set pieces.
But I will just say real quick, Stefan, sorry to interrupt. Peter Bosz literally in the press conference after the match said, we had so many corners in this game that we don't need to practice them this week. Obviously, he was joking, but that is the worst take I've ever heard from any coach. As much as I love Peter Bosz, that is exactly what you should be practicing.
Yeah, no, Dortmund even more so because they have conceded 3 goals already this season from corner kicks or set pieces in general. And that is obviously not a very good statistic for them because it was one of the major weaknesses. And overall, just, crosses and anything that's whipped into the box aerially. And if we go by the Who Scored match forecast, there are 2 things. One is extremely likely, and that is Borussia Dortmund will score as a result of an opposition error because, according to Who Scored, avoiding individual errors is Bayer Leverkusen's biggest weakness. And if we look at Jonathan Tah, maybe there's something to it. I don't know. I haven't seen much of Leverkusen yet, to be perfectly honest. And with the very small sample size of 3 games, Anywho, so and the other one that's very likely is Bayer Leverkusen will score from a set piece situation. So I think both are likely. It's also likely in my book that Leverkusen pounces on an individual error by Dortmund. And when you talk about Piszczek handling Bailey, I think Lucas Piszczek has been fine defensively so far this season. Yeah. Just his passing, his build up, as per usual in the opening weeks of the season, he just hasn't found his groove yet. Not 100% in form, but I'm sure that Nico Schulz will not be available, and that means Achraf Hakimi will play on the left side. And Leverkusen do attack more over their right wing. So I think that's going to be Bellarabi and Havertz and Volland, that sort of triangle, which is going to be, Hakimi's main priority. And so far this season, or in general, Hakimi has not been super defensively sound. So I think this is going to be where Leverkusen will try to pry Dortmund open. Let's say, forward-minded style of play from Hakimi and Mats Hummels' lack of pace is a dreadful combination, if you ask me, against a team like Leverkusen. And at the same time, of course, it's a very good test for Dortmund before the match against Barcelona, because that Tuesday night game will not be any easier, and we will talk about that game and preview it on Friday with Alex Troika from BarcaWelt.de. So look ahead to that. So yeah, this is where I see a weak spot that Leverkusen can attack.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100% that right side, like Karim Bellarabi, I think is going to be an immensely important person in this match. And he's done nothing but prove that he is, he's the consistent player for Leverkusen. He's one of the fastest players, obviously. You mentioned the 19 corner kicks. I should also point out there were like 46 crosses. I think Rasenfunk pointed out that there were 46 crosses in the last match, and it's absolutely ridiculous. That's what I'm talking about.
It's actually
players.
Very unlike Peter Bosz, though. Like, this is not a good sign.
Completely. Yeah, it's not a good sign. Exactly. Yeah, you're 100% right. Like these wingers should be cutting in. They should not be crossing the ball. They should be cutting in and making opportunities that way. And I do think, hopefully, that Peter Bosz recognized that. And in this match, it'll be a little bit different on the right side, especially. And Bellarabi, whatever, he can cross the ball, but he's much more important, in my opinion, when he's in the box and taking a shot from even whatever angle, because he generally tends to sink those. We'll see. It's,
if I might interject real quick, if
Please.
I'm perfectly honest, 46 crosses and 19 corners will be more effective against Dortmund than against Hoffenheim, because Hoffenheim do have Posch, Vogt, Big Churches, Staphylidis, Rudi, and Grilic, basically to guard the box, and these are all very tall and very feisty players that can win aerial duels, and it's very tough to get the timing right against these players, and it will be much easier, I assume, for Dortmund, who also have another center back issue, because Manuel Akanji, I assume, will also not be fit for this game, and I personally am very intrigued to see who Favre will play in his stead, because usually you would say, okay, Danaxil Zagadou is the logical choice here, but he is also left-footed. So do you want to have a left-footed player in your right center-back spot? Usually you do not. That would mean you would play Leonardo Balerdi. He just made his debut for Argentina's national team when they pounced, I think it was Mexico last night, for 8 minutes. I didn't actually see it because I was already, not asleep, but just half awake.
You should have been asleep.
No, it wasn't that late. But nevertheless, it's funny that his national team debut comes before his Bundesliga debut. So do you throw him in at the deep end, or do you let Zagadou play and then do you shift Hummels to the right or not? So this is a question where we will look forward to get an answer, because of course Dortmund sold Ömer Toprak, who would have been perfect for that position next to Hummels. So yeah, and another question going into this match day, and but if there's Zagadou playing, I also don't think playing a lot of crosses makes sense either. Even though sometimes he has the problem of not jumping for the ball, because he thinks he just can win every header just by standing there. So Anywho, I
I'm curious.
interrupted you rudely.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious to ask you. Obviously, Kai Havertz is Bayer Leverkusen's engine, and I think we saw that in the first two matches, and then you see in the third match how if he's shut down, it's negative. It has a negative effect to Bayer Leverkusen's style of play. So someone I would think Lucien Favre has picked out to shut him down, and I'm curious to know, how are you going to mark Kai Havertz out of this match? Because I think that has to be the first responsibility of Dortmund in this match.
Well, if I try to enter Lucien Favre's mind, I think this is a very good opportunity in his mind to probably play Thomas Delaney just for that reason, because Julian Weigl so far has not provided a lot of defensive cover, especially Julian Weigel's lack of pace is an issue. So his tracking back is just if you analyze the goals Dortmund have conceded so far, there were just too many moments where Julian Weigl, had he had better legs, would have been there to prevent it, but just wasn't able to. So I think because of Kai Havertz and because Lucien Favre is a very cautious coach, we might actually see Thomas Delaney next to Axel Witsel and basically try to man-mark Havertz a little bit. That being said, I'm curious myself. Also, I'm very curious to see how the second half pans out in this game, because I think both teams will not have decided this game by halftime. I think it's still anyone's to win. Mm-hmm. And at least in Dortmund, I'm not watching Leverkusen as closely, but in Dortmund, Peter Bosz was actually quite horrific when it came to in-game coaching. So his decision making wasn't always on cue. Lucien Favre is a mixed bag in that regard. So sometimes he really gets it on the money, and sometimes he's just so far off where everyone's just scratching their heads and not knowing what's going on. So I wonder what kind of night this will be for Favre and for Bosz. I think the last match between the two, I think Favre made the better adjustments, but I'm also not 100% sure because my memory is a little bit jaded in that regard, and I didn't feel like needing to go back, especially because both teams are a bit different now that there are just more options for Favre with players like Götze, Guerrero, Hazard maybe, and so on and so forth. So who knows what he's going to do. But yeah, this is certainly one aspect people should look out for, just for the tactical changes and the substitutions in the second half and how that affects the game, because I think in the end the game will be decided after the 60th minute or so. I'm pretty sure it's going to be like 2-2 by then or so.
Totally agreed. This is and for Bundesliga fans, intelligent Bundesliga fans who like football on on that kind of level, like this match will probably be decided by the managers. Like, you have teams that are basically equal to one another. They have enough momentum at each position that they could beat one another. But this will come down to potentially, the managers making the right choice. And I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see, because both managers are sometimes kind of curious about how they do things. But I will say Peter Bosz has shown more of I guess an ability to put in the right players at the right time here in the last season and 3 games or what have you. I think you're 100% right, Stefan. It's going to be after the 60th minute that the game is going to be decided.
Yeah. Also, what's interesting overall about this match day is the game after Dortmund against Leverkusen is Leipzig hosting Bayern. And I think
Bayern.
that has obviously huge implications. So if Dortmund lose this and Leipzig win, then there's already a 6-point gap between the two teams. So that will not be easy to make up for Dortmund. And in either case, if it's if it's a 4-point gap to Bayern, it's also not ideal for Dortmund. So this is just in the grand scheme of things, it's already sort of a must win, just because I think the media, including ourselves, were a bit reactionary after the 3-1 loss against Union Berlin, but I think it was also quite deserved because the problems that were already visible in the last 2 games for Dortmund are quite worrying, because it's the same symptoms that Dortmund basically carried over from the Rückrunde. So, as I said earlier, the big question really is, can Dortmund play on their very best against the best teams of the Bundesliga? And Leverkusen certainly should be mentioned in that breath. So, again, for Dortmund, this is just a very important game, especially before the Barcelona match, because the atmosphere in the club might tilt a little if this is going haywire. And the same question, obviously, also for Leverkusen, right? I think Leverkusen also have at least title hopes, right?
I don't think we ever have title hopes, to be honest with you. At least I don't. Top 4 hopes, certainly. And Vizekusen would be absolutely happy. I'd be happy with. I said earlier, like, Rabba Leipzig is going to Red Bull Leipzig. I don't even know why I give them the courtesy of mentioning the name, but I think they are going to win this. The more interesting thing to me, too, is the Champions League. Like, you guys got drawn in pot 2. We got drawn in pot 3. I would think our 2 groups are the absolute most difficult groups in the Champions League. So, Dortmund obviously has expectations that they should probably go out of the group. When you look at the group that Bayern Leverkusen is in, you can very honestly say, you
have Atletico Madrid, Juventus, and Lok Moscow. So you will play against Andre Schürrle. Oh, no,
yeah, exactly.
No, he said Spartak, right? I can't remember.
He said Spartak. And I totally fucked that up on our podcast. I called it Spartak Moscow, but it's Lokomotiv Moscow. Regardless, whatever. We'll be in the Europa League, and that's, we should try to win that as well. But
so you will play against Benedikt Hövedes, who is with Lokomotiv Moscow. And Jefferson Farfan, who is also there.
That's my boy. He was not. I could go on about Peruvian players, but I'm choosing not to right now. We'll see. I think the Champions League is going to be. I think it's going to be interesting. And as much as I tip Leverkusen to probably finish 3rd in that group, there's always a chance you finish 2nd in the Champions League. It just depends. And we have Lokomotiv at the Bayer Arena for the first match. So hopefully, if that's 3 points, I'm not saying it will be, but hopefully if that is 3 points, that's a huge start. And both of our teams got drawn into the worst possible groups. Wish we were Manchester City.
Yeah, or RB Leipzig for that matter, because they play against Benfica, Lyon, and Zenit, so they have a fairly easy task, even though they were drawn from pot 4. And I think Bayern have Tottenham.
That's it. Yeah, Tottenham. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, basically. I mean, they have Olympiacos Piraeus, who I think at the moment you can't really take too seriously as a threat, and then of course Red Star Belgrade, which in theory also should be a quite comfortable win for Bayern, or I mean, I guess away to that game they will just need a point. I mean, these days it doesn't really matter anyway if you win your group or if you finish 2nd, because the luck of the draw can just pit you against the best teams one way or another. But as I mentioned earlier, we will talk about the Champions League later this week, because I thought if you have Barcelona and Leverkusen in 1 week, basically it makes more sense to have 2 episodes. I think we have thoroughly discussed the upcoming fixture. Is there anything else for you to say that I have missed, or that you think is worth mentioning?
No, but if I were to give a prediction for the match, I think we're looking at a draw, and it could be a 1-1, 2-2 draw. And I think I don't know. I think both teams would be kind of happy with that. Because, yeah, I mean, it might not help them in terms of the standings as much, but I think it will help them in terms of knowing where they are, what the level is at the Bundesliga level, so to speak. I'm going to say 2-2 draw. I think there's going to be some goals for sure.
Yeah, this should not be a boring affair. And even though I'm very pessimistic about this game from Dortmund's perspective, I will give an optimistic prediction because it's Leverkusen after all. So Leverkusen have a habit of playing really well and then not winning. So
especially at Dortmund.
Dortmund, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to go with a 3-2 Dortmund win where Dortmund will play absolutely horrible, but will be saved by their individual class yet again. So that's my prediction. Eric, lastly, how can people get in touch with you on Twitter and the Neverkusen podcast?
Yeah, I'm at Schnix, SCHNIX B04, Schnix Bill04, on Twitter and at Neverkusen Pod, whatever, I don't need to spell it out. It's at Neverkusen Pod, and yeah, you can find it probably linked to this podcast. So thanks, Stefan, for having me, and it's always been a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope we continue to do so.
Yes, the pleasure was all mine, Eric. Thanks for coming on and spending some time on the Yellowwallpod. I will hope to return the favor. Maybe I'll come on the Neverkusen podcast, but only if Dortmund don't completely play a horror show.
Depends on how. Yeah, exactly.
I don't need that pity party in my life. Anyway, if you want to reach out to me, please do that on Twitter at Stefan Butzko. If you want to get in touch with the entire crew, then go to Twitter or Facebook at Yellowwallpod is the handle there as well. If you want to read our written content where you will find news, features, and interviews translated, then go to theyellowwall.net and pledge $1 via Patreon to access that content. And as I previously mentioned, that $1 will go straight to my healthcare here in the United States. So
I can affirm that Stefan is right. He needs that help.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there are a couple of poison pills you have to swallow if you make the move. So that's that. Yeah, if you want to subscribe to the podcast, please go to iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and now we also have a YouTube channel if you prefer that. So you can all find that again on the Yellowwall.net. And this is all for now from us for the next 2 days, because we'll be back on Friday with the Barca preview. So see you then. Goodbye. Thanks for listening.
Ciao, ciao.